Life in prison. That's what happened yesterday when jurors in the Nicholas Cruz trial decided, and the judge decided, that Nicholas Cruz, the Parkland school shooter, is now sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, if you've been watching this weeks ago, we first told you, if you watched the show, we heard about the Parkland trial, and we've heard about the Parkland shooting. You want a recap of that? Just look up the Parkland trial, and we'll give you some inside stories. And if you want to get up to date on this, I recently created an episode on the GMB YouTube channel to help explain this. But I want to talk about other things that I did not mention in that 20-minute clip, such as the emotions. And statements from the victims. That's what we have not covered, and that's what we're going to cover tonight as we dig deeper into this trial. So before we get to the victims, let's give you a recap on what happened. Now, in that episode, we looked at the judge's reaction of when the judge brought up the children, meaning the defense's children. And I was kind of upset. But the defense was out of line when he questioned about the judge's children and bringing the child into this. So
and now to the testy exchange between the judge and the defense, the judge even kicking out one of the attorneys. Janine Stanwood continues our live team coverage from the newsroom. Janine. Nicole, families turned their ire not just at the shooter, but at the defense team, and things got heated.
When these people have sat in this courtroom and watched this behavior from that table, and they want to say that they're not happy about it, what is the problem?
Fireworks inside court. Judge Elizabeth Scherer kicking out a defense attorney.
You need to sit down right now. You're out of line. In fact, you're excused.
And dismissing the public defender after they objected to some of the language used by loved ones of Parkland shooting victims.
Judge, that same venom that the court is expressing is the same venom that defense counsel had to sit through this entire morning.
Please go sit down.
Judge.
You're inappropriate and out of line.
Families know they can't change the shooter's fate, but at some points, some turned their anger not just at him, but at the defense team, even bringing up this pre-trial hearing video that surfaced, appearing to show an attorney flash her middle finger.
Somehow, though, you all managed to be petty.
Karen, this is what you all will face for the rest of your miserable life, because you are all a team.
There was nothing threatening about what they said.
Veteran retired prosecutor Gail Levine weighing in.
If they didn't like the comments made by Mrs. Oliver or Mr. Schachter, then they should have stood up, objected. Nobody said, I'm going to come in with a hammer into your house and kill you.
As you heard, the public defender worried about possible retribution, more testimony, and the formal sentencing scheduled for tomorrow. Calvin.
Okay, thanks a lot there, Jenny.
Which was today. Today was the sentence, and a lot of these victims, a lot of the victims have been saying what they had to say. And let me tell you something. You have the right to say whatever the hell you want. This is America. This is the United States of freaking America. And you have the right to say whatever you want. Whatever you want. No questions are off limits. There ain't no off limits. You have the right in this country to say whatever you want. Whatever you want. And that's exactly what I said. And for this defense bringing up the judge's children, you need to stay out of it. You do not want to make this judge angry. I'm on the judge's side. She runs the courtroom. The tail doesn't wag at the dog here. This dog does not wag the tail. The judge is in charge of the courtroom. The dog doesn't wag the tail. It's like with kids. We got the tail wagging the dog here. The out-of-control child is the tail, and the dog is the behavior. So now we got the tail wagging the dog here. I tell you guys what right now. If I was in that courtroom and I made an outrageous comment like that, I would automatically leave that courtroom right now, period. Still ahead, our continuing investigation into the love swindle scam, like I told you on Game Break Monday. But first, we're going to hear more from the judge, as I talked about on the GMB YouTube channel. If you want to see that, then I'll think of something. So stay with us. Up front tonight, fireworks in the courtroom. If you heard in Parkland, Nikolas Cruz was getting the life sentence without parole for his role in the Parkland school shooting. Now remember, he confessed. This is the same similarities to what happened in Oxford, Michigan with Ethan Crumley. He is charged with murder. He pled guilty. And if he's convicted, he could face life in prison. The same thing that happened here in Florida. What I'm going to start doing is covering things that I did not talk about in that video, in that episode that I just did, the 25-minute video. So what I'm going to do is cover the things that were talked about and some things that were not talked about. And you might not be too thrilled about what I have to say. So let's take a look from Fox 3 Tampa Bay as the full thing.
Such a fireball.
It is very important, considering what has been happening throughout this nation with threats to the Speaker of the House and violence that has incurred, that we do not create an atmosphere where dog whistles are being emanated from this courtroom, encouraging folks to act on those same types of behaviors. This is a sentencing hearing. We are asking the court to direct the state to direct those witnesses to address the matters at hand, and that is their feelings with respect to how this particular sentence impacted them and how that will be helpful for the court to render judgment. But to direct any other statements or any other suggestions to the defense and to the jurors to encourage or incite folks to act on those encouragements is not appropriate.
There has been no incitement, there has been no remarks. How you can equate violence,
I agree, Mr. Weeks.
Talk about is the defendant's violence.
Right, and respectfully, Mr. Weeks, Ms. McNeil, who's lead counsel in this case, has made all of these arguments. I've heard them. There's been 16 people that have testified. Only 2 have made a direct comment to the lawyers. And
you know, Judge, I'm standing here and I see that Jeff Marcus jumped up really quickly. But no one jumped up when people were referring to karma acting in the universe. No one was jumping up when they were referring to the defense children. No one jumped up to try to tap down that rhetoric. That is the rhetoric that I'm talking about. That is what I'm trying to be very clear on. Jeff Marcus, the state, they can hide behind their arguments, but we all are witnessing what is occurring in this courtroom.
which is myself. I'm a judge,
And
I understand that I'm in
Thank you,
charge
Judge.
of the decorum, and I feel that 99% or a great percentage of what has been said has been appropriate. Everybody has maintained decorum, but for a few comments, it's best to just move on as opposed to highlight them.
This is true, Judge, but I am witnessing a building of momentum, and I'm encouraging the court to direct the state to tap down on that momentum so it does not reoccur and it does not become a theme. Thank you, Judge.
Your Honor, for the record, the only thing the state has said to any of these witnesses when they get up is, would they like to say something on behalf of the victim they're representing? There's been no encouraging or inciting, as Mr. Weeks has put on this record. That is a blatant falsehood and a recreation of the record. As far as no objections being made, it's the defense that could have objected. It's not the state's duty to object to their own witnesses when they're testifying.
Okay. Listen, I've already heard. If you have anything else to say, you can put it in writing at a later time. I've heard from both sides more than once. That's going to be it. I've made my decision. Like I said, 99% of what's been testified to has been appropriate. I do not want to highlight the few things that were said that were perhaps not appropriate, and let's move on.
Judge, I'm asking for 20 seconds next.
You can have as many seconds as you want in writing, and you can put all of your objections in writing. They've been made multiple times from your chief assistant, from Ms. McNeil, and I don't want to hear anything else. I've already heard it. Is there something that has not already been argued?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, exactly what is it?
Judge, before Mr. Schachter took the podium and testified before this court, I wanted to reflect that both Mr. Marcus and Mr. Satz looked at the statement prior to the reading. And so their implicit adoption of what he was saying is improper arguments in this court. The court should chastise.
Okay, but what you are doing right now is highlighting something and making more of a spectacle. So if your office in general does not want to facilitate and or incite violence, then we need to just sit down and move on. That's it. There were 18 witnesses, 16 or 18 witnesses that testified today. There was nothing that was said until Ms. McNeil made her point made, and, you know, we're moving on.
But is the court going to do anything about maybe stopping it from happening again?
When these people are upset about specific things that have gone on from that table, like shooting the middle finger up at this court and laughing and joking, Ms. McNeil, be quiet. When these people have sat in this courtroom and watched this behavior from that table, and they want to say that they're not happy about it, what is the problem?
Judge, I have no problem because I have thick skin. But once you bring in my children, I think that's highly improper. I didn't
even know you have children. I don't know what you're talking about. Your children? What about your children?
For them to comment on my children is highly improper. Before this court to allow that kind of testimony is also improper.
I don't remember any comments about any children. And if there was, it obviously didn't.
Wait for it.
It came and went without me noticing it.
Judge, I can assure you that if they were talking about your children, you would be.
You need to sit down right now. You're out of line. In fact, you're excused. You need to go sit in the back with your chief public defender. Mr. Weeks, please ask the lawyer from your office to go sit down and not say anything else. To try to threaten my children and bring up my children is inappropriate. Go to the back of the room now. That just violated about every rule of professional responsibility that I have never. If you're going to get up here and you're going to...
Judge, I asked you to go sidebar on this matter.
You, sidebar or not, you don't have one of your assistant public defenders say something about my children?
Judge, that same venom that the court is expressing is the same venom that defense counsel had to sit through this entire morning when their children
brought up her children multiple times during the trial. Nobody knows if I'm barren or not. They don't know about my children.
Judge.
Sit down. Sit down.
Judge.
Sit down, Mr. Weeks.
Please do not summarily dismiss me.
I'm summarily dismissing you. Go sit down.
I'm asking the court. I asked the court to go sidebar.
Go sit down. You don't threaten the court's children.
Everyone in this courtroom.
Go sit down.
No one in this courtroom had to endure what we had to endure.
Go sit down. Miss McNeil has made her children a spectacle more than once during this trial. That was her choice. You have absolutely no right to have one of your assistants come up here and suggest something about my children. Now, please go sit down.
Judge.
You're inappropriate and out of line. Go sit down.
Judge, may I have a brief recess?
No. Go sit down.
May I have a brief recess so I can speak to my attorneys?
We're moving on with the sentencing, Mr. Weeks.
So I can have a brief recess?
No.
Thank you.
It's 1:36. Thank you.
Okay. This is the part where I say I'm going to cover things where I'm not done. It's the same thing I've talked about on the video. Now it's going to be different from what I'm talking about. So here's what I have to say different. And I'm putting verbs in my sentences. Somebody needs to speak for this judge. Even though it's her courtroom and all. Someone needs to speak for her. And that's me. That defense, you, the person who made the middle finger, you are being immature. You are an immature defense attorney. You're being immature. And for you to be coming up here, giving out the middle finger, and laughing and joking, this isn't funny. This isn't just, I got you, mother effer. Oh, I want to go get you, mother effer. So I must tell you that you're being immature. You may say whatever you want in the parking lot or at a house or whatever. Just do whatever you want. Just do whatever you want, not in a freaking courtroom, and there ain't no winner you go to sign out. That must tell you that you're being immature. You need to grow up. As with defense, you need to grow up. You need to grow up and keep the judge's children out of it, you slick. Come in here and talk about someone's kids. You talked about my brother and my sister? I would seriously screw you up. You talked about my mother, my father, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, my brother, my sister, or any one of my nephews and pets. I would seriously screw you up. For good. And if I did the same thing to the judge, she would seriously screw me up. For good. Come in here and talk about someone else's kids. Y'all need to hear me. Y'all gotta hear me here on this. Because I know what's being talked about. You guys are being immature. Laughing. Flipping the bird. This is immature behavior. Like something out of school or something. You don't like this person. You kidding me? I've been listening for something I've not heard. There was not one person that asked me, Jonathan or Mr. Carmody, tell me what I can do better next time so that way this doesn't happen again. Nobody asked me this question, and if someone asked me, Mr. Carmody, what can I do? And you know what I would have told you would have done? I would have told you to stop flipping off, stay quiet, stay seated, and if you have any objections, write it down on that damn piece of paper. It's not funny to be flipping people off and talking about someone else's children. That's like if I talk about the judge's mama. Then I'd be thrown out of that courtroom in a real jiffy. Like Jiffy Pop. I mean, these guys need to just grow up and become better people. Can they learn? Absolutely. Can they be retrained? Absolutely. You should be retrained. And in my opinion, I think that the defense and that person right there needs to be put on administrative leave immediately regarding that behavior. Because they're acting like children. And let me tell you, adults act like adults, children act like children. That's the way it should be. That's all the stuff that I have not covered. That's all I have to say about this. And if there's any more updates on this issue, I'll bring them to the GMB channel. Let's stop this behavior before it gets out of hand. You've heard me talk about the love swindle scam on Monday, where Chris Hansen confronted Rosie, Ann, and suspects in this case. And you've also heard about the victims, the other people. Up next, a very similar case. Catherine Cryer looks into these love scams and why the police aren't doing anything about it. Stay with us. If you watch Monday's Give Me a Break, we talked about the love swindle scam on Dateline. It was to where younger people took advantage of older people by taking their money and sometimes themselves. We looked at I think it was Rosie, Ann, Steve. I think it was three. I remember three. But we've heard the other side of the stories from the suspects. Now there's another case. Now there's another case involved. So again, we're going to show you this report from 2020, and then we're going to tell you about how you can avoid these again. So here's Catherine Cryer with the 2020 investigation.
This lawyer and her associate are searching for evidence of a crime.
Here's a torn-up check with Ronnie's name on it.
The old man who lived in this apartment was befriended by a young woman and her relatives, whom police have characterized as members of a gypsy family suspected of criminal activity. They did errands for him and helped around the house.
Oh, this is unbelievable. How could anyone live in this?
They brought him medicine and food.
Look at this guy was eating out of cans.
And he handed over to them his life savings, $180,000. 90-year-old Jim Callahan is now destitute, living in a nursing home.
Thank you.
He says his new young friends talked him out of his money with hard luck stories about hospital bills and unpaid rent.
Right now, it's about the worst I've ever felt in my life. I don't sleep, I don't eat.
After allegations of fraud were made in court, a judge appointed a guardian to look after Jim Callahan, and police opened an investigation. But Callahan may be lucky. He only lost his money. We've come across other cases with a similar MO involving members of another gypsy family, the Teenies, befriending the elderly, ending up with cash, cars, houses. But some of their old friends have died under suspicious circumstances.
Let's be perfectly honest here. The evidence clearly suggests that he was poisoned.
Murder.
Yes, I think my uncle was murdered, yes.
James Blasto's 85-year-old Uncle Andrew lived alone in New York City, rarely seeing family and friends. In the fall of 1993, he disappeared. James called emergency services and learned that his uncle was in the intensive care unit at Bellevue Hospital, mysteriously overdosed on sedatives, barbiturates, and painkillers. James rushed over to see him, but was stunned to find out that someone had barred the way.
And I asked why. And the bureaucracy at Bellevue Hospital in New York said that the wife permits no visitors. I said, what wife? He has no wife. He's not married. He's never been married.
Andrew Vlasto, a lifelong bachelor, had indeed taken a wife. This woman, Sylvia Mitchell. She had a marriage license showing she was 28, 57 years younger than Andrew. 3 weeks into his hospital stay, Andrew's condition was improving, but then he was rushed back to intensive care. Doctors were confounded by a discovery. Andrew had been given a powerful drug they did not prescribe, digoxin, also known as digitalis. It's used to regulate an erratic heartbeat. If taken improperly, experts say, it can kill you. The day after doctors discovered the digoxin, Andrew died.
As soon as my uncle died, I did everything I could to make sure that an autopsy was going to be held.
But Sylvia, Andrew's young widow, tried to block the autopsy. She failed. The autopsy report states he died from a drug overdose complicated by pneumonia. There is no determination at this point that digoxin contributed to his death, but authorities are still investigating. And so is James Blasto.
You have to keep in mind that this whole episode between marriage and death took 82 days.
And boy, oh boy, what a mess. Holy cow.
We recently accompanied him to Andrew's apartment in search of clues and to learn more about the way Andrew lived.
He was a loner and cheap, tight, didn't spend any money on anything, on clothes, on food, on furniture, nothing. He didn't spend a dime.
Over a lifetime as a banker, a journalist, and a businessman, Andrew had accumulated $250,000 and real estate in his native Greece. But marriage must have changed the man. He and his young bride headed to the glittering Taj Mahal casino in Atlantic City, wiring $70,000 from his bank account, now jointly owned by Sylvia. Sylvia collected the money in cash. Andrew's neighbor, who saw him regularly, was shocked to learn about the trip.
He went to Atlantic City? Is that what they said? Somebody said?
Lots of money and the new wife and off to Atlantic City?
Again, that's so uncharacteristic. It's very difficult for me to believe that.
As all this was going on, bankers, relatives, neighbors, did anyone check up on him? Did anyone see what was going on?
No. Nobody knew.
Except perhaps this man, Sylvia's longtime companion. His name is Tom Teeny, and he's a convicted con man. 2020 has learned that at the same time she was married to Andrew Vlasto, Sylvia apparently lived above this store with Tom Teeny and their children. Is this the woman that lived next door?
Yeah.
No question about it.
No. That's it.
But here they use the names Tom and Tina Goldman. It's a pattern. Between them, they've apparently used at least 10 names and 10 addresses in 3 years. Let me show you a picture of this woman. Do you recognize her?
Yes, that's Sylvia Taney. Used to live here.
All right, no question about it?
No question.
Soon after Andrew's death, they rented and ultimately were evicted from an apartment owned by Tex Fitzsimons in New Jersey, under what may be their real names, Sylvia and Tom Teeny. They said they were expecting an inheritance.
Well, they told me that his father died, that he had a lot of money, that he owned apartment houses or something in Greece, and apparently from a little bit I got from them, it was like a millionaire's estate, so...
Sounds like Andrew Vlasto's estate. He owned real estate in Greece. In fact, a woman who lived there spoke to Sylvia on the phone about Andrew's death and recorded their conversation.
How did Andrew die? I have, pretty good idea and pretty good suspicion as to how, but it's not confirmed yet. I just know that he was neglected at the hospital.
Sylvia and Tom Teeny have disappeared. Their last known address, this mail drop in New Jersey. But across the country, in San Francisco, we found some of their cousins, members of the same gypsy family, who investigators say have made a virtual business out of collecting from one old friend after another. This is Angela, also known as Teresa Teeny. She lives with her boyfriend, George Lama. The Mercedes you see, it's registered to George and a 94-year-old friend who died. And the house, it used to belong to 87-year-old Nicholas Bufford. He signed a deed making Angela co-owner of the property. She was listed as his granddaughter. Then they got married.
The next month, they went back to the county recorder's office and recorded another document that said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. This isn't my granddaughter, it's my wife." And the next month, he was dead.
Faye Farron is a private eye in San Francisco. She has spent months investigating the activities of George, Angela, and Angela's family, and says Angela may have learned from her mother. Mary Steiner, also known as Bessie Teeny, married an 89-year-old man who left her this house and his entire estate at his death. While still married, she befriended another 89-year-old who gave her this $1 million apartment building. And then there's Angela's brother, Danny Teeny, also known as Sal Lamance. He befriended a 79-year-old widow who made him co-owner of this house, then later sued him, claiming she'd been defrauded. Danny Teeny denies any wrongdoing. The lawsuit is pending. But it's Angela who appears to be the most active member of the family. After the death of her 87-year-old husband, she became friends with this man, Stephen Storvik, a retired longshoreman in his late 80s. He lived above this deli where Angela used to waitress.
He told me that he developed a close relationship with Angela, and he liked Angela very much.
Chell Beaumont Noel is a lawyer and was a friend of Stephen Storvik. He says Angela and George used to bring Storvik food, but Storvik grew suspicious.
He felt that he was being poisoned. And one morning he told me he woke up totally stiff, he couldn't move.
What did he think the cause?
He thought they were putting something in his food.
Stephen Storvik was so convinced of a plot against him that he told the police George and Angela had drugged him and were out to get his money. No charges were ever filed. Storvik made a new will.
And that will specifically excluded who?
Angela Buford.
Stephen Storvik moved away. He died in 1992, leaving nothing to Angela. His death was attributed to lung cancer, but police are investigating. Private Eye Faye Farron says that in 1993, she got a tip that Angela and George had found 2 new targets.
When I talked to the police, they knew about this, and I said, well, who are the victims? And they said, well, we don't know. And I talked to them later and said, well, did you find out who the victims are? No, we don't know.
So Farron and her associates followed Angela here to the home of a 93-year-old friend. They videotaped Angela as she arrived and entered the house. And they followed George to the home of a 94-year-old, the man with whom George owned his Mercedes. As with Stephen Storvik, George and Angela brought food to these elderly men.
This was definitely not Meals on Wheels.
This woman, who wishes to remain anonymous, was a friend of Harry Glover Hughes, the man George was visiting. She believes that Angela and George deliberately isolated her friend.
They changed his phone number to an unlisted phone number. Did that make any sense? Not to me, it didn't.
Nor did it make sense that George Lama's name was put on Hughes' bank accounts. Faye Farron says she was worried about Hughes and Richard Nelson, Angela's friend. Farron went to check up on Nelson. Who answered the door? Angela.
And she told me that, oh, he was just fine, that he'd slipped and he'd fallen a few days before, but he was fine now.
An informant told the police George and Angela were poisoning Nelson and others with a dangerous heart drug. And guess what? The man who owns this pharmacy told 2020 George Lama bought large quantities of the heart drug digoxin from him. Remember, that's the same drug found in Andrew Vlasto in New York. Richard Nelson's doctor tested him for digoxin, which is also known as digitalis.
He went in and was tested and was found positive for digitalis.
Had the doctor ever prescribed digitalis for him?
No. And so they waited 2 weeks and they tested him again. And he had more digitalis in his blood.
Richard Nelson's relatives moved him out of his house and left no forwarding address. Yet Angela paid a visit to his new home. There are now strict orders she is not to be let in again. Harry Glover Hughes' family was also alerted. A guardian was appointed after officials stated in court that Hughes was prey to Angela and George. He died of a cerebral hemorrhage last spring and was cremated. Around that time, investigators began exhuming bodies, citing a reasonable possibility that the deaths were caused or hastened by drugs surreptitiously administered by those who hoped to profit from their demise. They dug up the body of Stephen Storvik, the man who told police George and Angela tried to drug him. They exhumed Nicholas Bufford, Angela's husband. They even exhumed the bodies of the 2 elderly men who left valuable properties to Angela's mother. Police are tight-lipped about the tests performed on the bodies, but 2020 has obtained this official report showing there was digoxin in Nicholas Bufford's body at the time of his death. Despite these suspicious circumstances, no one has been charged with a crime. In fact, there's been no official determination that anyone was even murdered. The San Francisco Police Department has refused to comment on the case. We tried to talk to Angela Bufford and George Lama. They declined. But in a letter to 2020, a lawyer for Angela said his client and anyone associated with her are innocent of any wrongdoing, and that there is no poison, no murder, and no suspicious death.
One of the detectives said to me, well, Faye, you know they're being poisoned and we know they're being poisoned, but sometimes these things just fall through the cracks.
Back in New York City, James Blasto is just as frustrated with the authorities investigating his Uncle Andrew's death.
Privately, they've said that they feel that, yes, he was poisoned. Yes, he obviously was a victim of fraud, but it's hard to prove. Andrew Vlasto didn't have to die. Andrew Vlasto didn't have to die.
Catherine, the first question in my mind, and maybe in the minds of many, why is it so difficult for authorities to mount a case against this kind of action?
Well, when elderly are the victims of fraud in these sorts of cases, you look at their circumstances. Oftentimes they live alone. They have few friends, no family around, no one's watching over. In some instances, they've become forgetful. Someone pays them a lot of attention, and they seem to give them their property willingly. So it's very difficult to then get testimony, get witnesses to put together a case.
That does make it a little tough. But any idea how widespread this is?
We know the population in this country is aging tremendously. There are going to be more and more people over the age of 85. Many times they move away from families, retire alone, and become very easy targets for frauds, for scams. And unfortunately, the problem is growing by leaps and bounds.
It's still very big and getting bigger. Thank you, Catherine.
And there are no laws and no criminal investigation happen. So how can you avoid these types of scams? When you return, I'm going to tell you. Don't go away. We've been talking about the sweetheart scam or the love swindle. It's to where younger women are taking advantage of older people by taking their money and caring for them and this and this. So far, we watched a Dateline report from Chris Hansen and a Catherine Cryer investigation that didn't want to be missed. So how can you spot and avoid these scams? We talked about it on Monday, but I want to go over this again because it is really, there is no way of knowing. So be on your guard. Try to look beyond the superficial. Whether you are interacting with people online or in person at a senior center, restaurant, grocery store, post office, make a point of keeping your wits about you. Unfortunately, deception comes in all shapes and sizes, and it takes place in a variety of settings. Be honest with yourself. Look in the mirror and ask yourself the $1,000,000 question. Why would a younger individual want anything to do with me? What is this person going to have a relationship with you? If you discover anything but betraying your money in your answer, you know you're headed for trouble. Never transfer wire on anyone. Especially important if you're communicating with a stranger. Keep in touch with your family. Share your new social interests and friendships with them. Your loved ones usually have your best interest in mind and can be trusted to provide honest advice. Consult a professional if an online relationship seems fishy. Law enforcement agents are experienced with sweetheart scams, especially since the use of social media has increased. If you're linking that something is required with a new acquaintance, contact a professional for a second opinion. Do your homework. These 2 videos that we've seen, that's your homework. Could take you 50 minutes to watch. 2 to 5, that's 7. 4 and 1, that's 5. It's 5. 57. Could take you 1 hour to watch this. Pursue relationships face to face. Don't feel ashamed and use common sense. Patricia Joyce wrote this article, and it's really just about this. So if you come across these scams, you better do your homework because these people are out there. Talk to the elderly. Have your elderly person watch these videos, these 2 clips, and you'll exactly know what I'm talking about. Common sense needs to happen, and let's not let this happen again as we try to end the new year. That's Give Me a Break for this Wednesday. We'll see you again for Give Me a Break Friday night. For all of us here at Give Me a Break and YouTube, it's your body, your choice. Good night, everyone.